Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to accelerate their business and grow their team. I'm here with Dave. Dave, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Benjamin. I'm Dave Fazio. I'm a 27-year IT industry veteran. Started off my career as an engineer in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, moved up through the ranks of corporate America and oscillated into consulting, ran and launched and started my own .com in 2002 and sold it in 2008. Since then, I've worked for Amazon as a chief strategist, worked in private equity, supporting mergers and acquisitions of multi-billion-dollar energy deals, and worked at Aspire HR, which is an HRIS enterprise IT solution provider, solution integrator, leading a global development team of over 50, building the next generation of enterprise software using a cloud platform, basically all the tricks that I learned at Amazon. And currently at Vira Insight, which is a fixture manufacturing, basically the store within a store and displays you see at brands like Walmart, Target, Starbucks, CVS, Walgreens, TJ Maxx, Elf. We do merchandise displays and all the design elements that go into the environment. We're a design and manufacturing firm with a global office in China, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Louisville, Texas, and other places are coming up in as well. So that's it.
Cool. Well, that's quite the background, man. I'm delighted to be talking to you today. Love to get to know you better. And the way that I love to do that is, what was your first job? Like, you've done all those amazing professional things, but how did you make your first buck? For me, it was a paper route, babysitting, but how'd you make your first dollar?
I worked in a grocery store stocking trial size products for over a summer. That's where I started.
That's awesome. What toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
That's a really good one. Should not be surprising for the career I ended up in, but I lived in Ohio as a kid. The closest pizza parlor in the 70s was Pizza Hut, and that was 45 minutes away. So I was way out in the country. When I was 11, our family got the first 8-bit computer, and that's it. I just sort of dived into that. In the old days of 8-bit computing, if you wanted a program and you're a kid, 11 years old with no money, you would go to the store and buy Byte magazine. And Byte
Mhm.
magazine had source code in the pages, and you would type the source code to get the game. And I did that. And over a series of years of doing that as a kid through my adolescent years and whatnot, I ended up teaching myself programming and not realizing it, teaching myself geometry, algebra, sequential thinking, basic language, sort of how the computer works. And it had no idea at the time what I was doing to myself, but essentially learning the way that computers think and then also learning how to think logically myself. And that helped me in later life in both school and academia, and then also as a developer and engineer when I started out my career as doing that.
Yeah, that's really cool. We had a Commodore 64. We're doing some of the similar things, like figuring out how to connect our modems to each other, tying up our parents' phone lines, just so we could play checkers, not realizing that we were actually online gaming before it was really a thing.
Same generation there. I was the Atari side, you were the Commodore side, but we both had what was called modems. They don't really call them that
Hmm.
anymore.
Yep.
And we were all operating in terms of baud, which is for the listeners, it's 150 bits per second, which is essentially 150 characters max throughput, characters of speed. It's like undescribably slow compared to what we have today.
Yeah, we were getting tired of trying to disconnect from the game, which meant, okay, well, I have to disconnect from my game so I can call you and figure out what we're going to do next, right? Because our parents were not quite down with having two phone lines.
Mhm.
And well, what could we do to like take the game out so we could just type messages, not having no clue what we were actually contemplating was some kind of like
Mm.
AOL instant messenger thing. But the buffer was only really enough for 2 bits. Like, what square on the board were you moving to and the number of that square? And we didn't know how to loop or buffer or stream the data through the connection to the other side. So we were kind of like fumbling in the dark, contemplating something like an AOL Messenger. A few years later, when that came out and was a thing, we were just so impressed that it was out and available that we didn't realize what we were stumbling around in. Well, what was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
My least favorite course in school was probably mathematics. I had a rough time at mathematics until it clicked that it related to computers. I found it very boring and could not relate to it until it started reminding me of computers and applying computer thinking to it. And then I was excelling at it. But for many, many years, I had a hard time with mathematics. My favorite courses were around creative arts. And in high school, I opted for the theater route. So I did art and performance, those types of things. And I actually carried that into college as well. But the creative side, I identified with more. As I'm older, I find an appreciation for both and probably lean more on the mathematics side, for my day to day. But creativity is still extremely important.
Yeah, love it. Well, what quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
There's quite a bit. I hate this. This is an awful example, but it's the one that comes to mind. Adolf Hitler. He once said that if you say something enough, no matter if it's true or not, people will believe. That's sort of a paraphrase. While that is a horrible example of a person to quote, that's one echoes in my mind because it's absolutely true. The art of persuasion, you keep talking about a message in multiple ways, basically triangulate your message in multiple ways. It's amazingly effective to convince people and help motivate them to do what you need to do. In IT, I would say that's one of my tricks is that I'll find ways to sympathize with my audience and phrase things in a way that promote my message in multiple ways over and over and over again. And then it's not long before they're parroting back what I just said. I guess I could say hats off to Hitler, but to hell with him. It's like it's
Yeah.
horrible, horrible example, but that's the example I have.
Yeah, horrible author. Interesting
Yeah, I
quote.
know. I'm sure he wasn't the original thinker of that. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that came to mind.
A couple of things I like to say is it's my responsibility to be understood, which is along those lines. Yeah, what you said like kind of goes back to that. Like it's my responsibility to be understood. So I'm going to keep trying to find the way to gain
Mhm.
understanding.
There's a measure of diplomacy, which is a fancy way of saying persuasion. And when you're in leadership positions, so I'm operating at the top level at this company, I was at the top level of my previous company. At AWS, I was walking into the C-suite and trying to convince them to do cloud transformation journeys. I don't want to, manipulation has a maniacal connotation to it, but there is the art of persuasion and convincing that goes into all of that, and that's diplomacy. Diplomats are trying to get people to come on their side through language and, concepts, and it's the same thing in leadership positions.
Yeah. There's this book which you may be familiar with, The 38 Laws of Power. There's nothing inherently good about any of those laws of power, but that book breaks down there's a lot of evil in that book.
It could be used for that, right?
Yeah. And you have to kind of look at it like these are the things that may be used against me. It uses these lessons of the aristocrat court. One example is if you buddy up too much with the king, aristocrats will kill you. But if you're not nice enough to the king, then the king will kill you. So you have to play the diplomacy game very carefully so as not to make people look bad. And you have to navigate it. And that may be like the truth of life in powerful positions.
One of the things that I would say as slowly through the decades worked myself through the different management levels, you have to have a core understanding of the technology if you want to be a technology leader. You can't fake smartness or knowledge. It doesn't work. The leveraging the ability to be diplomatic, whatever that means, persuasive or motivating to the direction you want to go, it is much more at play than I would have expected. I would have initially thought without experience that you just get more and more experience to become more and more an expert and a domain expert. But as I'm sure some of your listeners may reflect back if they're in tech, often their managers and their managers aren't any smarter than them. So what are they doing that's different that got them up to those levels that get them those salaries and those bonuses and whatnot? It is that they are doing something right in how they're communicating with others more than their knowledge of the tech stack that goes behind that.
Yeah, to go deeper on that, I've started talking internally and I've put a couple of videos together for my team. And what I've articulated is that it's recognizing results language versus solution language.
Mm-hmm.
And I witnessed, in our case, clients would ask results based questions, something to the kin of like, when can I have it? And then the developers answered with a bunch of solution language. Well, when the flux capacitor flexes, then I'll be done and then you can have it. And that's like, they're like, well, that is not what I asked. You did answer my question, but it's not the question I asked, right? You didn't speak my language back to me. You gave me a solution answer and I was looking for a results answer. And so we really have talked about like recognizing if the subject matter is results oriented or solution oriented and traversing that chasm very carefully. Like, okay, if a results results question was asked, hey, project manager, you need to find a way to answer that question to the best of your ability. And then before we go into solution conversation, we need to make sure that we've shifted the mental gears to be ready for those details or for that demonstration or what have you, not mix those two worlds, the results world with the solution world. I don't know how that fits on you, but that's really helped us with that tiering conversation.
I never thought about it in those terms, but I have related it in those terms of making sure you're answering the question the right way and being very specific and clear in your communication. That's another thing, especially with technologists. Everyone has their person where they ask what time it is and they'll tell them how to build a clock. And it's really not what they're getting at. And the art of being clear and presenting your ideas in a way is so important. The overall themes of understanding how to communicate in the language of the audience is super important. If you're talking to engineers, they're going to want to hear the answer in a different way than an executive. And on top of that, you layer in the minutia of personality. You might have learned something about, for example, I report to the CEO of this company here. I had the really great advice from one of his direct reports when I started here that he wants to hear options. So I'm here to build transformation strategy for the company. So I understand I'm not just going to declare what the strategy is. I'm going to declare here are the pathways and the pros and cons to each, and let him figure out which one he wants. And it's a win-win because every one of those strategies I like. So I'm giving him sort of an illusion of choice, but it actually is a choice. It just happened to be in agreement with any one of them. And I actually did that. I'm rather new in this position at this job and gave my big presentation for 2025 as far as how we're going to build the company and transform and all the things that they hired me to do. And it was completely ate it up. So good advice, and listened to what somebody told me and applied that with what I knew about this leader, and was successful in my initial message with him.
That's great. Yeah, giving options. It's a good addendum. And how to make a clock, or what time is it, and then how to make a clock. That I may take that. I hope you don't have a trademark.
No, I don't. I run into them almost at every job that I have. And as a leader, I have someone reporting to me that's a little bit that way. So it gives me the opportunity to coach and provide feedback. People often compelled to answer what they want to answer. So if the question is in the realm of something that they want to say, they'll get it out, whether or not that they should or not. I also see this more often represented as when you're presenting an idea, if the room reads it another way and starts going a different direction, go with the room, unless you absolutely have to stay on your original message, which is almost never the case, but sometimes it is. But go with the room and don't force your message down when they seem to be going path B. Go with them and build rapport and continuous progress going down the road, whatever you're going, but read the room and go with the room. So many people get hung up on expectations of what the messaging should be, and they hold to it and they force it through. It ends up almost always being lost if the room isn't with you on that.
Yeah, it's funny. We're talking about digital integrations, but we could also be talk about politics for the last 5-6 minutes here.
Yeah, that's
Like
exactly
just
right.
political communication is always about, just give me a lane and I'll whatever word salad I can shove into that lane.
That's
Here I
right.
go.
It's a little ironic in the last few years. We actually haven't had real debates. We've had sort of sound bites, but there was a time when the presidential candidates, for example, were sat in front of a panel and actually given policy questions. And often what you would see is if they hit some topic that's a rough one, the politician will answer a different question. And so they're answering and they're having a complete statement that has a beginning, middle, and end. It's in the same family of like answers, but it's not actually the answer. It's a very common manipulation that politicians do for sure.
Well, I'd love to get some insight into your tech mind here. What tech trends significantly impacted your industry and how has your company responded?
The current industry I'm in is fixture manufacturing, like I said, design and manufacturing. You're going to hear this over and over if you haven't already heard it ad nauseum. The whole AI revolution is impacting. So think about design. So what we often do, we'll collaborate with a customer. They'll have a fixture. So let's say it's a lipstick display. It's a plastic display that has a lipstick and accordion shelving in it. So when you pull out one lipstick, the accordion shelving pushes the back product to the front, and it always looks like a nice tidy display. So that's just one example of all the different types of things we do. There are considerations when you make these on how you cut the plastic. You can use design tools that help optimize using AI the pattern of cutting on the material to get the most parts from the material. Or before, you would eyeball it, you'd have your canvas, so to speak, virtually, you would place and copy and over again. But AI can actually help with that. And also, from a quality standpoint, AI is used routinely, even in home 3D printers solutions now as well, to have the right kind of parameters to, like, for example, if it's a chair leg, whatever the design of the chair actually is, make the actual inner lattice of the chair and the materials that go and that structure the interior legs, for example, do that in a way that saves material, but still has the same weight characteristics, that carries the same, like we want to carry a 250-pound person or whatever it is per leg. There are AI routines that run through it, save material, make it less expensive to make. On the assembly side, AI can help us. We give a complete design package and say, well, how can we make this with less parts, less screws, and also have high quality product at the end? So it's easier to manufacture. If it's easier to manufacture, it's probably cheaper to manufacture and faster to manufacture, and that saves time and money, which is all money. And then less materials using AI. How do we create this chair leg or tabletop or whatever the case may be so that it uses less material and it costs us less to make? And that's all with the miracle of AI.
I love that. Those examples of AI don't seem like they're LLM dependent. Those seem more like what before ChatGPT and these LLM types of AI got more popular, the language model side. I was familiar with AI machine learning as some sort of predictive machine. Like, this is the right way to do it. This predicts the best result. I had a big background in online advertising, and so we were using machine learning and AI in that sense. So I almost feel like your definition of AI scenarios is the one that I came to find to be more accurate. But now in the commercial space, we're thinking of it very differently as the thing that takes user queries and translates them, these agents that are very LLM dependent. That's refreshing and interesting to hear AI referred to in the way that I'm most familiar and not in the way that's become suddenly newly popular.
100% agree with you that there is the delineation between the AI before LLMs. It was a trained model specifically designed for a very narrow purpose for the audience before LLMs. And still to this day, AI is often used to do one or a few very specific things. But with LLMs, if you have a workload that's compatible with ChatGPT, you have a much broader canvas to work with, because it's for the first time, the difference between the technologies is for the first time, you have simulated reasoning with the LLMs. It's an emergent property of the technology, which is a whole mystery and a conversation itself that's fascinating, but it is different. And I would say that in my previous role at Aspire HR, when we were creating HR software, LLMs are totally changing that game. So for example, we were using a classically trained AI model to parse resumes. So use AI, it would parse a resume and say, okay, this person is coming in with a help desk technician profile. And so we know his skills. We're going to categorize his skills. He has it listed this way, but we want to standardize it this way. It's a 20-year-old model that's been proven and trained and updated, and that's great. And that's what we were using. But then during the process of development, LLMs came out and we experimented with it. And we found that the LLMs in this use case were like totally revolutionary. So for example, you can do so much more than parse a resume. You can parse a resume. You can send it text. You can send it a PDF. With the right plugins, the LLMs can read it and decipher it and do so much more. For example, not only can you pull skills, but you can ask the LLM to derive likely skills on top of it. So for example, if you have a web developer that says that they know JavaScript, they know HTML or whatever, but they leave out CSS, it's very clear that they probably know CSS, a very high probability that they also have other items that they left out because they were focused on one thing. From all this ATS matching and skills matching that are going on today systematically, it's super important to really understand your candidates. With ChatGPT or the LLMs, all the various ones out there, you can pull out a profile from an application that's far enricher than the actual application itself with high probability of accuracy. It's incredible. You can use the same engine to do translate into different languages. You can do a short synopsis of who this person is. You can do a one-sentence bio if you wanted to. If you're looking at like hundreds of resumes, you can now have a one-sentence bio of who these people are. So the application screeners or HR representatives or whatever could do instant screening of massive amount of data, because that's really what they're trying to deal with nowadays. There's definitely a purpose-built utility that's very, very helpful from a design aspect in my case. But then from a language, like I said before, simulated reasoning, there is a totally totally new set of problems that technology can solve that were very difficult to try to solve before LLMs. So
Yeah.
you're going to see in the future, and you're already starting to see it now, when you start stacking in the text to speech and the cloud platform and how they're making it very easy to adopt these technologies across the board, you're going to see people interacting on sales calls with simulated agents, and you're going to see health benefits in calling a helpline that's a simulated. I went to an HR, there's an HR Tech, which is a big Vegas, everything in HR sort of conference that's every year. I've been to the last two of them. I walked through the startup alley. They have like an area for startups. And there was more than one counseling app that was a simulated counselor using those realistic looking, but you could tell it's AI generated, person talking head. And I remember I challenged one of the guys there and I said, who's going to use this? Like, who's going to use a robot for counseling? And they said, you would be surprised if you look at millennials, which I'm older, I'm Gen Z, or Gen X, excuse me, I'm Gen X. So if you look at the younger gens, they would rather interface with a non-human and do self-service out and not have to expose themselves to other human interactions from a commerce perspective than they would talk to a human being. The new markets that are coming up with the expectations of what's coming with the new digital age and kids using Instagram and all that and moving up as adults, they actually prefer this model because of privacy. It's more private to have a heart-to-heart conversation with a bot that's trained to understand the right DSM responses or whatever the case may be in psychology and actually apply potentially even some actual theory and wrap it up into the model than it is to talk to somebody and maybe expose yourself in a way that they're not comfortable. Whole new world is coming from this AI. You and I have both grown up, it sounds like in the same generation. We've seen the personal computer hit homes. We saw online, and then we saw internet, which totally transformed that whole online experience. Then we saw mobile phones. And then we saw the cross marriage of mobile phones and online with being effective with the iPhone and the smartphones that came after that. And that totally changed society in ways that no one expected if you look at how societies were back then. And now we're seeing the collusion of these hot powered computer devices, like super computer devices that are layering in now simulated reasoning that's being applied to music, language, art, and all of those things are colluding with VR layered on top of it. You kind of wonder what is coming up. This is the biggest change and biggest shift in technology and how we've used it I've ever seen. And we've seen big ones. I don't know if you agree.
I definitely agree. I think my concern is, do my grandkids come home and say, I'm marrying the robot. I'd like to get married to the robot, or where relationships, human to human connection, like your counselor example, makes me concerned in that way for the future. That there's some kind of allure to the expected response, right? Like, I love my wife dearly and how much better of a person she's made me because she responds in ways that I would never expect. That concerns me that my grandkids could at least have to tussle with that temptation to have more artificial relationships than real ones.
I think that it's just inevitable that there will be people that have real problems relating to artificial personalities. I don't know what they're going to call them, but AI bots or whatever. I'd also say that, right now, when you look at our relationship with our technology, it's very transactional. Like, I want to look at my email, I look down at my phone, I pull up my email. When I look for information, I pull up Google, whatever the case may be. But with AI and Siri and Apple Intelligence and all these new things that are coming out, they're wrapping in emotion into the responses, and ChatGPT has it now. It can laugh and it can respond with emotion, and it sounds very, very realistic. I actually think that our relationships are going to be less transactional and more emotive. And they're going to be personalities that we want them to be. They're going to have the voices that we want them to be. They're going to learn how to effectively communicate to us on an emotional and logical level. And so we will be irreparably trapped into having actual relationships, potentially arguments. People are going to fall in love with their devices. All these new things that sound ridiculous now, I could be wrong, but I see it as an inevitable outcome of the mashup and collusion of all this technology and power coming together. And we're just babes in the woods. We're just humans.
Yeah. Neil Stephenson is my favorite science fiction author. He has the first book of, I think, the Baroque cycle, this Quicksilver or something. I won't spoil the book, but the premise of the book is this illustrated primer. It's basically a tablet. It's just a more poetic way of describing a tablet. A girl starts to interact with the tablet. And in that world that Neil Stephenson creates, the people in the upper class, they call them the Victorians because they distance themselves from technology. And so while the common class is putting in implants and becoming more cybernetically enhanced, the Victorians or the aristocrats kind of say, nope, that's not us. In fact, we are going to be very discreet about our use of technology. Like we may use it, but you won't see us use it. And that is always in the back of my mind as these changes are happening, that there will be a choice how much technology we actually want to use. And I think you'll see successful people shying away from it. You'll see this classism around the use of technology at some point.
I've never actually thought about that way before, but it's sort of like the drug dealer versus the drug user. Like people that are wise enough to understand that they should not be immersed into it and into that lifestyle, and the others that will get lost in it.
Yeah.
That's probably the case.
Let's keep moving here. What are 3 technology innovations you're betting on to drive your business growth?
Well, that's an easy one. So in this particular business, the fixtures manufacturing and design, I think that if you look at the industry, it's not focused on a bedrock of technology that draws out new IP as much as I think the opportunity is there. So in this case, for this company, the adoption of cloud platform services, and a lot of people don't truly understand what that means. As an ex-AWSer, it is more than just hosting a server somewhere that you don't see. It is actually a collection of services that can be stitched together to provide any level of any scale of compute, AI, intercommunication between any region, storage, analytics, all those things combined in a way that can be consumed very quickly and inexpensively to do it right. Applying the idea of this technology to a company like this that has a global footprint will really help make this company be more agile and responsive to changes in business. Right now, this company, along with our competitors, are mainly operating in, I would call it 2010 mode. Everything's on-prem, everything's stitched together with classical infrastructure that's maintained by the companies. And that means you're about as agile as it would take for you to buy the servers and rack them in yourself. As I got here and realized that's pretty much the same with our competitors, there's a huge opportunity to change that so that we can pull up services faster than our competitors. We can respond to the business need quicker. We can communicate better with more security. So that's a cloud platform is one of them. The other one is mobility and promoting mobility, and it goes hand in hand with cloud platform. This company has a headquarters, but we are open to remote workers. And by expanding the opportunity to hire from anywhere, opens up your resource pool for a more diverse and high quality candidate. A lot of companies are like, we have some competitors that are in New York area, in the Northeast, and they're hiring in the Northeast. Well, that's great. There is a lot of talent in that area, but you can't possibly expect that all your best candidate is only going to come from that region. So by becoming more mobile and really coupling that with cloud platform, you're really got a really leg up on our competition. And then lastly, it would go back to the AI. So if we can adopt AI into our design phases more than we have those essences of what we built for parts and pieces, but AI is soon going to be able to do a lot of pre-renders. So customers want to see if it's a store within a store, you walk into Best Buy and you have that Apple experience, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of that. If you open your eyes and go to different stores, that's a very popular model now for advertising brands within a store. The ability to turn around mockups that are 3D and convincing and 100% real using this generative AI technology is there. We are trying to figure out how to make that happen quickly. And so if we have a conversation with a customer and come back an hour later after the conversation and say, here's a few mock-ups that we pulled together that represent the basic elements of the conversation to help communication and help the product design process go back faster, it will be light years ahead of the competition. Because in our industry right now, nobody's doing that. It's just right there. That technology is right there for us to pick.
That's cool. Well, what advice can you share for connecting technology roadmaps with overall business strategy? Sounds like you've been the author of many companies' roadmaps. How would you recommend approaching that with all these new technology opportunities? And, is there any planning approaches that you tend to take?
First thing I think about is know your audience. Never go in with a strategy without understanding the sympathies of the company. The sympathies of the company are going to be the product of what the company's identity is and what the company is dealing with. One of the tricks of the trade that I learned from AWS, if it's a public company that I'm going in and pitching a transformation story, read their public filings, because in their documents that they publish, they state what their current concerns are and what their current projects and initiatives are.
Yep.
So if you can state and support a message of technology that supports that, that's great. Now, the bedrocks of effective technology is it realistic? Meaning, is it an approved path, meaning don't unicorn a solution that's never been cobbled together and hope to do that on a grand scale off the bat. It's highly risky. What is the lowest risk, maintains good security, and has a attractive price? It doesn't matter if you are at Google or an Apple or a Microsoft or a Vira Insight or an Aspire HR. Cost is important, and everybody wants to make sure that they're doing something and not overpaying. Maybe not in the government sector, but in commercial areas, it's very important that we are fiscally responsible. So having a message that uses tried and true technology that is cost effective and secure and is directed towards achieving the goals of the business and the sympathies of that specific business will go a long way of getting started with that. I would say that in the lucky thing is, with all this knowledge at our fingertips with Google and all those other search tools and with LLMs and all the information that's baked into those solutions, it's very likely to find that what you're trying to do has been achieved before, at least metaphorically, in another business. At this company or my previous company or at the various companies I walked in under the AWS brand, companies like to think that they're unique unicorns and we do things differently. But from a core services and information, very few actually are. Even if you're doing high volume transactions, there are other businesses that are doing very high volume transactions as opposed to other companies that are focused on security. So there is a pattern of technology that is likely well worn. And if you can leverage the heart of that in your message, promoting that for a company, you'll go a long way of getting the ear of whoever you're trying to convince or sell a project to.
Yeah, that's great advice. Can you share a lesson that you've learned from a tech initiative that failed to deliver expected value?
So yes, in my career, it is not just mired with successes. There's been some missteps, a lot of mistakes along the way. The key is to learn from them and try not to make those mistakes again. I say most recently, as a product owner, the best way to put it as a CTO, running product teams, I made the mistake twice of trying to use very gifted engineers that are trained in one thing to use a different technology in another. I'll be very specific. If you are trying to develop in the cloud platform, it is very different development effort than if you are developing sort of classically like three-tier architecture or sort of like what's more common today. So twice I leveraged the advice and help from very skilled engineers that have years and years of classical development, and I asked them to do cloud platform development. They both failed very hard. It was when I listening to a podcast from the current CEO of Ford. He was talking about engineering electric cars. They asked the question of what's the big lessons you learned recently, and he says, do not think that your standard automotive engineer can build an electric car. It's a different beast. And I immediately thought of classic developers versus cloud platform developers. If you would abstract those lessons, make sure that you have the right tool to do the right job, whether it's a person or a technology, and understand that you're not trying to mix and match similar things. You want to try to mix and match exact things as much as possible.
Yeah, we definitely experience that when we're working with, we do a lot of application modernization. Oftentimes, the in-house team are from a more monolithic architecture mindset, and then we bring a microservices, cloud native type of mindset. And so in between is exactly that. It's the kerfuffle that occurs when we're trying to pull apart things and microservice them. And that's just not how they were built in the past. So using the legacy architecture as a reference oftentimes becomes unreferenceable. So we use AI to identify business logic rather than architecture patterns. Definitely in the middle of many of those debates. And it's not even really the best of both worlds, that you're not really trying to compromise. You're trying to swing and transition, transform.
Both work, but the middle ground is really messy. That what you end up with is a very messy product that nobody wants. And you know, when you were talking, I was thinking, This phenomenon has happened before cloud platform, and that's the move to agile. So many times I was hearing when agile was up and coming that agile doesn't work. And it's from the sympathy of somebody that's trying to run it like a waterfall project. They don't understand that there's a whole different way to structure your tasks, i.e., stories, your phases, i.e., epics. There's different ways to do that with an agile mindset of iterative delivery and immediate business value, as opposed to the big bang approach of the large releases. It is a different way to think. And so I've learned that lesson when I'm in organizations that I'm trying to, for example, I'm retrofitting this one to be more agile from a tech perspective. And I'm telling people, look, you've got to think differently. We're not spending 5 months to develop to a spec and then delivering value of hopefully of hitting the mark in 5 months. We are going to deliver what we can in 2 weeks. If we have to reduce some of that to make the next step, that's fine, but at least we have business value now. And I repeat it over and over again because people don't want to rework, so to speak. They think that the rework is more costly than the loss of actually getting business value today. And that's just another example of the mindset of it's not like a software engineer going back to that idea. Somebody who knows Python, that's really just the start of what makes a good engineer. It's how you assemble those Python code bits in an architecture to represent your project. And classical thinking is very different in how you put that together from you said monolithic, which is great, and microservices, which is great. People don't understand that you have a GitHub repository of 100 different repositories for your project. Each repository is its own microservice. They're not comfortable with that. You just have to get them to think differently and to experience the differences. And often, once they come on board, they see why is there a movement to go cloud services and microservices and microarchitectures? Why is there a move to go to agile? Because if you get it and you implement it right, it can be better. And there's maybe some cases where that's not the right way to go. But in software development, I've seen huge successes with the successful agile deployments over waterfall. And most of my career has been waterfall. So I'm old enough to be mostly in that era.
Very cool. Well, what experience would you share or advice would you give to somebody just starting their?
So I'm a technologist. So if they're coming to me, they're probably asking about an area of tech. If you have no experience and you're coming into an environment, the best thing you can do is to get yourself credentialed. And that means, study, get your certifications, and pick a focus area that you really want to dive into, at least to get a foothold. If you're a generalist starting out with no experience, it's hard for people to understand where you place in an organization. This is my opinion. If you focus on something, Windows administration, front-end development, Joomla or WordPress development, whatever it is, find your foothold to get in. And because there are so many different technologies types out there, find the one that you like the most, because what's going to propel you to go forward are things that you enjoy versus the things that you feel obligated to do. Every tech stack has its ugly pieces that you don't want to focus on too much, you don't identify with or whatever, but find the one that you have the most passion for, because it's the passion that's going to separate you, and it's the certifications that's going to put you up on the board for consideration. And then also understand that when you're starting out, be comfortable with change, not only changing your role potentially, but changing your venue. So it is the long, hard road to stay at a company for 20 years and hope to get the promotions, and if you continue to train and learn, that you deserve to become market compatible. Companies are not set up to pay you for what your experiences are from an incremental day to day to day. Most companies aren't. So be comfortable with going to other companies to get those big jumps in salary and to get moving it and to get ahead if that's what your goals are.
That's great. Well, appreciate it. If people like what you've had to share today, how should they connect with you?
They're certainly welcome to check out my website. I have a professional website where they can contact me. It's Dave Fazio. So it's davefazi.io. Very easy to get to. And it talks about me, and it also has ways to get a hold of me. And I'd love to help out where I can.
Well, cool. We'll make sure to have that in the show notes. And I just really appreciate you being here with us today.
I appreciate the conversation. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Benjamin.